I'm not sure that we're going to change the subsidies until we appreciate the true impact of climate change and its devastating effects on our environment. Climate change is real. It's taking place as we speak. The race is on. There's a lot of things we can do. We can make it marketplace friendly to reduce greenhouse gases. Obviously, alternate energy, nuclear power. We can make the necessary steps if we will have the courage to do so and face up to the issue. Until the majority of Americans appreciate the consequences of climate change and human activity, i.e. greenhouse gases, we won't see a change, because the special interests, the automobile manufacturers, the coal miners, all the special interests that are arrayed against it will argue that it'll cripple our economy. The fact is, if we don't do something about this, then our economy as well as our environment is going to be crippled, because we'll have to take far more draconian measures the longer we wait.
Green buildings have been more expensive only when they're designed by amateurs and when they're not thought through properly. When they're designed by people who really know what they're doing, we're building green affordable housing at the same cost as regular affordable housing, or maybe 1% more. For example, we're doing a project in New Haven now in which we're building a series of single-family homes. Typical home in New Haven costs $1,600 a year for heat and for utilities. We're building it, it'll cost $600 a year for utilities for the entire home, saving a low-income home buyer $1,000 a year. That's a huge savings, and it's only costing us maybe $1,000 more for the house. That's a 1-year payback. That's nothing. They're mortgaging these with 30-year mortgages. It's a total win-win.
When we ask people in cities all over the world to design what their cities should look like, they're all green, they're all low-rise, and 90% of them have no cars.
The exciting thing is that we do now have technologies in energy conservation, in water productivity, in family planning and contraception, in raising energy productivity throughout the economy, in developing vast new sources of energy like wind power, for example, that can help us solve virtually every problem we have. The exciting thing is that almost everything we need to do is being done by at least one country, and in some cases several countries around the world.
And this mosque here has a congregation of about 1,000 people each week. Now, of those 1,000 people, a certain percentage will come away from their prayers really motivated to take the path of violence. This is actually a very key factor in the war on terrorism, which is that if one is to reduce the number of young Muslims who are following this path, one simply has to try to limit their exposure to these ideas.
Smallpox is the greatest threat because of its high lethal power and the ability to be disseminated, and it's contagious. It could be transmitted from one person to another. It's a very realistic scenario that somebody infected with a dangerous disease could spread the disease among passengers of the commercial flight. The person could fly essentially anywhere in the world, and nobody would recognize that the person is sick until very obvious symptoms takes place. But again, that could be quite difficult to recognize for some health authorities or in some countries. So if people are not prepared to be careful, if people are do not take measures to protect themselves from casual spread of the disease, that a single infected person could be very dangerous.
Smallpox, if introduced, could begin to spread and could certainly go worldwide in a population which today has never been more poorly immunized because we stopped vaccinating back in 1980.
I think it's always difficult to quantify or speak scientifically about the actual risk, and the sort of the parts of risk here are the threat and our vulnerability. The threat here is twofold. There's a Mother Nature threat. Every year influenza comes back. It's been mediated in the natural processes to be different. If the avian influenza that's basically hitting Asia right now somehow gets into the swine population or in the human population through the swine, that could be very scary. How do we compare that risk to the risk of bioterrorism? It's a difficult call. I think where we want to get is to where our infrastructure, whether it's the public health infrastructure, whether it's the homeland security infrastructure like we're working on here, that they're aligned. They're in synergism in terms of what they can do for the United States, the people in the United States. And if we get there, then I think people should feel like it's no more a risk this year for bioterrorism than it is to worry about the flu. Behind me is a system we call the Autonomous Pathogen Detector System, or APDS. And it's a podium-sized instrument that can do 100 different types of biochemical assays simultaneously. So we could put 100 tests for different types of pathogens. They can be biothreat agents or things like influenza or adenovirus detectors. It does those systems using antibody-type tests like you'd find in a pregnancy strip test. But it uses colored beads instead of a strip, and that lets us do the test all at once. If it gets a positive, it does a second test based on nucleic acids. So it's a PCR test or a DNA diagnostic. So those two tests together give us a very high level of confidence that if we say there's a certain pathogen in the air, it's really there. You could imagine the Secret Service or the mayor's staff or whoever, a major CEO, they go on foreign travel and they would like to carry the briefcase version of the system around so that they know what they've been exposed to on a continuous basis. And again, since you can intervene and treat people prophylactically for anthrax and plague and these other diseases, knowing 2 hours after someone's exposed completely changes whether it's a problem or not.